Take a quick look online at what is generally considered to be the hardest Call of Duty campaign, and World at War will be right near the top. And more often than not, number one. The difficulty level at times is quite frankly ridiculous. It's not the sort of hard that's like a fun challenge either. It's more just flat out unfair and makes you wonder if it has even play tested that thoroughly. So with all that in mind, it would make sense that anyone determined or crazy enough to complete it on Veteran would then stay far, far away and certainly not consider putting themselves through it ever again. But here I am. In the name of content and giving the people what they want, this was a challenge that I could not ignore. Having finished the game on its hardest difficulty back in 2008 as a bright-eyed 15-year-old, I still have very strong memories of some extremely painful parts of World at War, looking at you, Heart of the Reich. With a rough idea of what lay ahead of me, I of course refused to look up any guides or tips. That seemed to me like it'd defeat the point a little bit. So were the hard levels really as bad as I remember them being? And were there any horrible parts that I'd completely forgotten about over the years? Spoilers for that last bit? Yes. Yes, there very much were. The start of the game, however, isn't so bad, easing you in and giving you a nice full sense of security. Don't get me wrong, you still die near instantly, but the enemy encounters aren't too bad with a little patience. Starting by being rescued from this hut moments before execution, I then helped my squad secure the village. There's actually an achievement available right at the start here for saving Private Ryan from the burning Japanese soldier. Unfortunately, I triggered it before I was in a position to help him really, so it was too late, so I'll be coming back for this one later. I fought through an assortment of bonsai charges and booby traps, rescuing second squad from the beach, and then came across a part of the game which is extremely ingrained in my brain: the ambush of Japanese troops playing dead. And my first death of the run. There'll be plenty more where that came from. And with the help of a conveniently placed leaky fuel truck, we attacked the base and armed the bunkers with explosives to cripple their operations. Then, making my way to the boat, had a rather close encounter with a bonsai charger, but luckily my buddy Sullivan had my back and dragged me to the boat. From there I witnessed a nice big explosion and picked up my first two achievements of the video. One story related and the other for completing the mission on Veteran. Next up was Little Resistance, fighting my way onto Peleliu from the beach and armed this time with the ability to radio in rocket strikes, which are the source of this pretty sobering moment of enemy troops stumbling shell-shocked towards you. But anyway, no time for any emotions or any of their achievements on the line, and the goal of this mission is to wipe out several machine gun nests whilst working through the network of trenches, and then call in rocket strikes on a couple of tanks to clear the way for friendly vehicles and marines. And whilst destroying the tanks, I unlocked an achievement for killing at least 4 soldiers with a naval bombardment. Pretty sure you only get the radio on this level, but it is an easy one. I was surprised I didn't get it earlier, to be honest. At the end of the level, we regrouped in the back room of the trench, where sadly Sullivan takes a katana to the chest. And this mission only took me about 15 minutes, which is similar to the first, and just like that one, there's nothing here that can't be navigated without a little bit of patience. Unfortunately, that's where the quick and easy missions finish for a while. Hard Landing is the third level, and whilst it didn't cause me too much difficulty, it was the start of the missions taking me a bit longer, 28 minutes this time, and from here, it only got worse, let me tell you that. It started with a nice stroll through a swamp when the Marines examining a down plane end up triggering a booby trap, and, surprise, more bonsai charges. From here we fought through more swamp and trenches to flank the Japanese defences, getting a go of the flamethrower for the first time. And speaking of the flamethrower, there is an achievement for burning an enemy out of a tree which can be unlocked on this mission in this open grassy area, which is home to yet another ambush with the troops hiding in the grass and the trees this time. However, I actually forgot it existed during this playthrough, so it's another one to come back to later. This leads to a large Japanese stronghold which I remember giving me a fair amount of trouble back in the day. Not sure how exactly because I didn't die here once this time, hugging the left side of the building and picking the right moments to push my way in with the help of my squad. Crossing the airfield and destroying the anti-air guns is the final objective for the level, and there are a few tanks to take out on the way, but plenty of bazooka ammo at your disposal and a fair amount of cover. And once across the field I crawled my way through the anti-air bunker and when close enough, sprayed and prayed with the flamethrower, which worked surprisingly well. And with the AA crews dealt with, the mission ends with a defense against a Japanese counterattack. There are a few mounted machine guns to use, which I'm sure make you feel like a complete badass mowing down the waves of enemies, but on Veteran you can't really poke your head up unless you fancy a quick death. So instead, the best thing to do is simply hide behind the wall and wait for air support to come in, rendering this whole skirmish rather pointless. Still, I managed to find a little spot and pop some shots to try to feel at least a little bit useful, and after chilling for 3 or 4 minutes, finished up and got the Veteran achievement. Next was Vendetta, the first mission of the Russian campaign, and this level is really good, in my opinion anyway. It gives similar vibes to One Shot One Kill from Modern Warfare, being stuck behind enemy lines and relying on a bit of stealth. The atmosphere is great, super dark, gloomy and depressing, and that's just about right considering it's after a massacre in Stalingrad. The iconic Reznov needs our help assassinating an infamous German commander, and whilst he's been tracking him, he can't fire his sniper rifle due to his injured hand, so that's where we come in. First up is a group of guards to take out, waiting for the planes to fly overhead and drown out the sound of your sniper. Yet again, I completely forgot about a miscellaneous achievement, which is a bit trickier than the previous ones I've mentioned, killing all the guards including the dog without reloading. It requires some smart shooting, and again, something I'll be mopping up later. Reznov was telling me about the location of the commander, Amsel, when suddenly we came under fire from an enemy sniper. This leads to one of the most memorable parts of the game, the sniper duel. This guy can be pretty tricky. He takes 3 hits to kill, moves from window to window, uses decoys, and kills you in one near instant hit. Basically, if you see the flash of his gun firing, then it's already too late. I'm only 4 missions in and I've already rambled on a lot about patience, but this is just another example of a part of the game where taking your time will save you a lot of pain. If you've lost track of his position, then just focus on trying to see where he is and get quickly back into cover and reset. When you see the top of a helmet bobbing up and down, ignore it because it's just a decoy and be ready for him to appear. He did kill me a couple of times, but after 5 minutes or so, I took him down and we kept moving. This next building actually took me longer, somehow. All I had to do was crawl through a few burning rooms and get upstairs, but I kept taking too long as I was trying to kill the guys at the windows. I got there eventually though, and the absolute hero that Reznov is lifted a burning plank of wood off of me with his bare hands. And back in the streets, we provided sniper support for Russian troops. Well, I attempted to provide sniper support. I couldn't actually see much through the onslaught of machine gun fire coming my way. And there were 2 armoured vehicles with mounted guns which were the source of a lot of frustration here. So much so I ended up getting the Purple Heart achievement, which requires you to die around 20 times on one level. Still, it had been pretty smooth sailing up to this point, so I was due some suffering. My pain was also eased by the fact that I completely fluked the Rough Economy achievement by killing 3 enemies with 1 shot when I was trying to take out one of the gunners. After that, Reznov and I reached the sniping position, and with 1 well-placed round I took out Amsel. The Germans weren't too happy about this, so we made a quick escape out of the building and into the river, bringing up the end of the mission. 40 minutes or so that one took me. Their Land, Their Blood was the 4th mission, and this was a nice change up from the stress of Vendetta. Lots of friendly troops charging across the fields with me, although not particularly useful. It was nice to have them there at least. There is one part I remember having difficulty on all those years ago, and it's this small section of trenches leading up to a machine gun nest. World at War has a rather unpleasant mechanic of infinitely respawning enemies at points, so you're forced to push up and trigger the end of the spawns. I managed to get through this bit without any deaths by making my way to the edge of the trench near the nest and slowly crawling forward. My allies pushing up and, to be fair to them, helping me safely reach the next checkpoint. From here I took out several German tanks with Panzerschrecks that were conveniently left scattered around before hitching a ride on a friendly tank to the final objective, clearing out the German base. I made this harder than it needed to be by completely disregarding all of the Panzerschrecks. They could and should be used to destroy the truck carrying troops and even the towers dotted about. So I could have saved myself from a fair amount of unnecessary combat, but maybe someone else can learn from my mistakes. Regardless, it didn't take long to overthrow the base and receive a rousing speech from Reznov, unlocking the Hammer Strikes achievement for completing it on Veteran. Back to the American campaign now, and missions that cause pain and suffering with Burn Them Out. The objective is simple: fight through the trenches and wipe out 3 Japanese mortar pits so that friendly tanks can advance. Unfortunately, the trenches are absolutely overflowing with infinitely respawning enemies, as well as those that fire down on you from the edge of the trenches, and also snipers in the trees just for good measure. You start the level with 2 weapons, a rifle and the trusty flamethrower, and honestly, you don't need anything else. The flamethrower spray and pray tactic is particularly useful here. The final room in Burn 'Em Out is what usually gives people nightmares. There's a corner to get around with very little cover, the enemies don't stop respawning until you push up to the sandbags, and there's a hole in the ceiling with troops firing down on you. Luckily, I've developed a highly sophisticated strategy for this part over the years. Okay, maybe it's not that sophisticated. I'll load up on smoke grenades from a tiny bunker nearby, lay them all down, and then let the flamethrower do the rest. I took my sweet time picking off everyone I could see before entering the last mortar pit and baiting out the final 2 bonsais into a wall of fire. Ticking off Burn 'Em Out was nice, but I was all too aware of what was still to come. Relentless is the 7th level and starts with a joyride being rudely interrupted by anti-tank guns. Then, fighting my way up the side of this first hill, I unlocked the Snake in the Grass achievement for, unsurprisingly, killing a soldier hiding in the grass. And there were a few anti-tank and anti-air positions to destroy, and one part that caused me a bit of trouble, having to push through this choke point of trenches. This leads to the assault on the caves and very clear instructions to stay behind the friendly flame tank as it advances up the hill. Instructions which I completely disregarded, leading to getting cooked alive. And the caves themselves consist of 2 rooms to clear out and a couple of tunnels. There's a ton of cover to take and my squad really pulled their weight here, running in and laying down some fire whenever I pushed up a decent amount, making end of this level really quite easy. Although I did have a rather unfortunate death, dying just as the very last enemies were wiped out. But that was the only death, and within the next minute or 2 we had taken the artillery guns, unlocking a story related achievement plus the standard one for completing the mission on Veteran. I took charge of a tank in Blood and Iron, a level very easy and a welcome break from all the running and gunning. As is tradition on Veteran, it doesn't take many hits to die in the tank, but I sailed through relatively untroubled by staying far away from the enemies and keeping moving when in open areas, destroying the various bunkers, tanks and the radio tower to finish up in just over 15 minutes, so it wasn't long before I was thrown back into the heat of battle. Continuing the Russian campaign but on foot this time, I had to take out some machine gunners for my comrades to advance at the start, and then fought my way into and through the asylum. There's nothing here to challenge you really, and if you've made it this far in the campaign, I don't think you'll have any issues. It took me less than 20 minutes to reach the final section, mowing down the retreating Germans either on foot or in a tank. There's an achievement available here for killing 15 enemies whilst on the mounted gun, but after 10 minutes of dying I decided it made a lot more sense to just come back and do it on the lower difficulty, finishing up the mission on foot instead. This cluster of 3 or 4 missions 100% felt like the easiest bit of the campaign. The only part of Eviction which gave me any sort of trouble was progressing up the street and into the sewer. But there is plenty of cover, and to be honest, I was probably losing a bit of concentration at this point due to the game's difficulty easing off. At least that's what I'll tell myself anyway. And after witnessing my allies become war criminals, only navigating the sewer stood between me and the end of the level. Now this was another section of World at War that I remember dying on a fair few times back in 2008, but once again, with the help of some patience and a lot of crawling, I made it with 0 deaths. Honestly, at this point I was starting to question if I've matured into a more skilled gamer, or maybe I just wasn't quite as good as I thought I was back then. Nah, it definitely can't be that last one. The next mission, Black Cats, is another nice switch up to the pace. It's the most unique level in the game and the cherry on the easy cake. You man the guns on an airship, laying siege to merchant ships, PT boats and Zeros. You're unlikely to die many times at all on this mission, but when it does happen it seems to come from absolutely nowhere, and sometimes even comes with a game crash. Anyway, I loaded back in and picked up an achievement for shooting out all of the spotlights on the merchant ships, and another for completing the mission on Veteran. And now we have arrived at pure hell. This next mission took me to a place I didn't want to go to. In total, I spent 1 hour and 45 minutes on Blowtorch and Corkscrew. That is longer than the previous 4 levels combined. I spent 20 minutes dying over and over before getting to the first checkpoint, and another 10 to get round the corner and up the first hill. The mission is similar in some ways to Burn 'Em Out. The plot is simple: destroy a series of bunkers whilst repelling an onslaught of infinitely respawning enemies. Sadly here the checkpoints are a lot less forgiving, and no moment encompasses that more than the 3rd bunker. I had a choice: loop round via the left flank or loop round via the right flank. Neither are great. For about 40 minutes I tried one and then the other, dying over and over and over again. I promise you this from the bottom of my heart, I fully intended on going back through the footage and totaling up my deaths during this whole video, until I got to this part of the game and I knew that I simply could not count that high. I found myself making actual progress more often going right, so I focused my attention on that side. The problem was after navigating the murder field and getting around the corner, I had to run up a second smaller hill head on into even more enemies to get a checkpoint, knowing that a death would set me back a painful amount. I spent close to 40 minutes on this one checkpoint alone. That is more time than I spent on nearly every other mission up to this point. Eventually a grenade forced my hand when I was nervously dancing on the spot, not wanting to commit forwards, finally ending my agony. Note to anyone wanting to complete this madness: save a smoke grenade for this part and it'll probably take 90% less time. The end of this level had me fighting through a series of narrow caves before clearing the bunker itself. Now this part was pretty ridiculous as well, with the amount of enemies crammed in there, but honestly, at this point I was just happy to have a new checkpoint. It was nothing the flamethrower couldn't handle anyway, and with the final bunker taken care of, I was free and closing in on the end of the game. But I wasn't getting ahead of myself knowing which missions still lie in wait for me. But before I get to that, I had the final level of the American campaign to navigate, Breaking Point. After Blowtorch and Corkscrew, this one is a breeze, and to make it even better, I unlocked 5 achievements finishing it, the first of which was Close Shave for surviving a bonsai attack. And whilst clearing out enemy mortar pits, I got to have some fun with the improvised mortar devices and killed at least 5 of those for some more gamer score. The plot of this mission is to assault and take control of the castle plus its surroundings, working through the tunnels, smaller courtyards, and eventually making it to the main courtyard of the castle where tragedy strikes again. A group of Japanese who appear to be surrendering are in fact very much not surrendering, and it's only possible to save one of your 2 allies. Saving Roebuck unlocks the Guardian Angel achievement, which I did in rather comical fashion. I died a true hero. And the end of the level is similar to Hard Landing. Pretty pointless on Veteran. The most reliable way to complete it is just huddle up in this corner and wait. Enemies will come for you, but for some reason they won't shoot and instead insistent on hand-to-hand combat. And after calling in air support a few times on the surrounding buildings, I was done with the American campaign and got the achievements to show for it. So if you've played this game before, you'll know what time it is now. Heart of the Reich is one of the most famously difficult levels in the entire franchise, maybe even the most, full stop. It starts off okay, fighting through, or in my case, around a ruined building and then the library, but what comes next has haunted gamers for nearly 15 years now. In order for the Russian army to progress, a series of Flak 88s must be destroyed. Of course, nobody but you is going to take care of that. And the area is not particularly big and it is absolutely rammed full of German soldiers. There is a lot of cover, but the enemies are also coded to flush you out with the spam of grenades that I still cannot believe was ever signed off on by the game's developers. The 4 Flaks, each completely swarming with infinitely respawning enemies, can only be destroyed by either planting a C4 charge or shooting them with a Panzerschreck. But you'll only find 2 ammo for those. And to top it all off, you will only get a checkpoint after destroying 2 and then all 4 of the guns. So I'm sure anyone who hasn't played it is starting to get a good impression of what makes it so ridiculous, but really you have to attempt it to fully understand. However, despite all that moaning, I didn't actually find it too bad this time round. Certainly not as frustrating as Blowtorch and Corkscrew, and it didn't take me anywhere near as long either. The most annoying part I found was having to wait for Reznov to signal the charge every time I died before being able to have another go. My strategy was to shoot the closest 88 with 1 ammo, which can be found resting against a burnt out tank, and then loop around the stairs and attempt a mad dash to plant C4 on the second. Sure, I did die a bunch of times, but after only 10 or so minutes I survived by the skin of my teeth to unlock a very welcome checkpoint. The small room straight ahead became my next objective because once in there, my allies would push up enough to be reasonably useful, which allowed me to go back outside and grab the second shot of the Panzerschreck. Then from the room I could shoot the 88 from a nice safe distance, and I genuinely don't think I've ever destroyed this one with C4, it looks far too scary out there. And then going back on myself one last time for the 4th and final gun, which is simple to get a C4 planted on at this point. And there we go, what a lot considered to be the hardest part of the entire Call of Duty franchise, taken care of in under 25 minutes. I actually ended up spending longer than that finishing up the level, but that was completely my own fault. All that remained was pushing up past the destroyed building and then up the stairs, but my brain was so locked into the mode of constant pushing and aggression that I didn't realise by simply sitting back and picking enemies off, my squad would push up themselves. To be fair, this is basically the only section of the game in which they do that, so how was I to know? So I died a lot attempting to rush the stairs before eventually trying to pick off some enemies from higher ground, and then had my light bulb moment once I saw my allies moving up without me. And that was the cue to follow and finish the mission. At least, that's what would have happened if I hadn't chosen absolutely the worst spot to stand as the pillar came crashing down. Oh well, it was funny at least, and 5 minutes later I was free from Heart of the Reich with the achievement to show for it and on to the last level in the game. While certainly not as hard as others, Downfall still took me 40 or so minutes, most of which was spent in the very last area, but I'll get to that in a minute. And first was a push through the lobby and up the stairs, which took a decent amount of attempts, and then into the Parliament room for a much more relaxing murder spree from the balcony. After shooting down the Big Eagle, we progressed through the halls and up onto the roof. Very fittingly for the game, the very last conflict was a massive pain and lacked in checkpoints. It was especially nerve-wracking as I'd done the entirety of World at War in that same day, and the clock was approaching midnight, and I really wanted the bragging rights of having it all completed in that one day. I say bragging rights, no one is ever going to care about that, but regardless, I pushed through the deaths and the tension, and with Reznov's help, planted that Soviet flag, unlocking achievements for finishing the Russian campaign, finishing the level on Veteran, beating the entire game, and finally, beating the game on Hardened or Veteran. And because I know you're all dying to know, yes, I did manage to start and finish it in the same day. After a good night's sleep, I returned to start tackling the miscellaneous achievements that I'd missed. I haven't mentioned them up to this point, but World at War has 13 collectibles to find in the form of death cards. I'd stumbled across some during my veteran run, but I was still missing the majority. So what I decided to do was just start from the first mission again and work my way through, in order, finding the death cards and also picking up any mission specific achievements along the way, on the easiest difficulty where possible of course. Fire was the theme of the next 3 achievements. First I saved Private Ryan from the blazing soldier, before burning an enemy out of a tree on hard landing, and then completing a mission with only the flamethrower, which obviously I did on Burn 'Em Out. I ran through Ring of Steel to get to the mounted gun section, aiming for the 15 kills achievement, and this was mildly annoying due to the fact that you can barely see what you're shooting at and the gun's recoil was absolutely horrendous. I was just about to reload the last checkpoint when thankfully the achievement unlocked. Next I returned to the sewers of Eviction and I killed 10 enemies when the lights had gone out, before I found the 13th and final death card for that achievement. Then I loaded up the first mission again and completed it using only melee and grenades. This one has to be on regular or higher, so obviously I chose regular, and it's a nice and easy one to get done. The Thrower 6.5 achievement is unlocked by completing a level on hardened or veteran without dying, so I quickly flew through Black Cats and grabbed that without any issues. And back in the tank for Blood and Iron, I destroyed all of the water tanks in the bunkers. The 2 easiest to miss are the water tank out in the distance and the bunker up on this hill. I just took my time and had no problem unlocking the achievement as the level ended. And after that, I took out Amsel's henchman without reloading at the start of Vendetta. The trickiest part of this is killing the last guy and the dog with 1 shot. It's a small timing window, but luckily the checkpoint is just as you're about to shoot, so I think I did it on my second try anyway. I knew the last 2 achievements were the most annoying ones, so I ended up putting them off for a couple of weeks. Eventually I built up the courage to boot up the game again and I went back to Black Cats to shoot down 45 zeros. I found online a guide of how many kills to try and aim for each checkpoint. The pause screen shows how many kills I had, and if it wasn't enough I could just reload the last checkpoint. In the end, I only had to do this once, so it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Certainly not worth putting off for 2 weeks. And finally, I went for the Gunslinger achievement, requiring Amsel to be assassinated with a pistol. The pistol can be found in the same room that you have the sniper fight in, and then you just got to carry it to the end. It's a quick mission to blitz through on the lower difficulty, and speaking of difficulty, this achievement won't unlock if you do it on Recruit, which I found out the hard way, so play it on at least regular. The window for killing Amsel is actually pretty big. It's just so hard to shoot him from that distance when you can barely see a thing, and you've actually got quite limited ammo on the pistol. But in the end I decided on waiting for the car to come for him, and then snipe the driver, forcing Amsel to run on foot through the most open area. Oh, and to top it all off, you need to hit him twice. I got there eventually after trying for 20 to 30 minutes and picked up the last achievement of the video. I'm still missing 3 achievements for the base game 1000 on this account, but they require playing campaign co-op online, and I didn't fancy buying Xbox Live for this account just to get them done. I have lots of plans for this account which will require online, so I'll get them in the future and add them onto a relevant video when I do. Maybe I'll go for all the zombies achievements again and include the ones I didn't in the last video. If you haven't tried this game on Veteran, you should definitely give it a go, and if you have, let me know how you got on. And if you want to see me struggling through another game, you should check out my video on finishing Prototype's achievements. But that's it for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.